This is the Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media. Now, here's Jason Jones.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to the Jason Jones Show, broadcasting from the west side of Oahu. Today's show is filled with intrigue, with suspense, with mystery. We have the one, the only Dr. Taylor Marshall, author of Thomas Aquinas in 50 pages, many, many books. And for the purposes of today's show, Infiltration, the plot to destroy the church from within. This book has an entire chapter on the Vatican Bank scandal. So with the release of Cardinal Pell from prison, a good man, a good shepherd who was railroaded for trying to get to the bottom of corruption inside the Vatican Bank, this story may be getting to erupt. And so to give us the basics, an overview of the Vatican Bank scandal and what to expect, I invited Dr. Taylor Marshall on the show. And today's show has been brought to you by Movie to Movement, promoting a culture of life, love, and beauty through the power of film. Go to movie2movement.com to follow us and learn about all of our great movies, including Divided Hearts of America, starring Benjamin Watson, in theaters this year, everywhere. The Vatican Bank scandal on the Jason Jones Show. Here we go. Aloha, Taylor Marshall. Welcome to the Jason Jones Show.
It's great to be here, Jason.
So last time you were on, we talked about the Eucharist, and that was one of the most popular shows I've ever done. The thing went wild for my show, and I thought you did such a beautiful job presenting the truth and beauty of our faith. And today, I want to bring you on because you have an entire chapter in your incredible book, Infiltration, and on the Vatican Bank scandal. And with the release of Cardinal Pell from prison, he was, convicted by a kangaroo court, unlike nothing I've ever seen in the English-speaking world. Really shocking. It was something like out of the Soviet Union. And he was a part of Pope Francis's commission to investigate the Vatican Bank. I would just like to kind of delve into this topic of corruption at the Vatican Bank because I am ignorant on this topic like most people. Of course, I have in my brain images of the Da Vinci Code, some guy hanging himself on Blackfriars Bridge, some banker,
Yep.
right? Like, and just Vatican.
Godfather
3.
The big one.
Yeah, and in fact, I have a story kind of like that. Maybe I'll share on the show. And the Vatican Bank, I was raised in a kind of my mom's family, my mother's family had a typical kind of anti-Catholic, Anglo anti-Catholic prejudice. And just the words together, Vatican and bank, when I wasn't Catholic, and maybe for you, it just was spooky, right there. And
yes, well, the name is officially not Vatican Bank, and this gets people really confused because the technical name is the Institute for the Works of Religion, which sounds kind of sanitary, right? Sounds like, oh yeah, an Institute for the Works of Religion. That sounds good, but it's actually a bank. It's the Vatican Bank. People call it the IOR, which is both the Latin and the Italian for the Institute of the Opere, like works, di Religione. So you'll see in newspapers, people say Vatican Bank, or sometimes they say IOR. It is the same thing. It's a bank.
And it really shouldn't be that spooky, right? I mean, churches have bookstores, coffee shops. They do works of mercy. So it makes sense. Maybe the Vatican should have a bank, or shouldn't they? Let's just start there.
Well,
is it a bad idea to begin with?
Well, everyone needs to understand that the Vatican is its own city-state. It's actually the smallest city-state on planet Earth. My son and I, when we're in Rome, we do a run, a jog. We've even done some races around Vatican City. I think it's like I'm guessing here, 2.4 miles or 2.2 miles. So you can run it in 20 minutes easy. And then we say, hey, we just ran around a whole country, ran around a whole nation. It's that small. And it has its own bank, which means it's not really regulated by the European Union or by the standard regulatory bodies, which makes it a perfect place to launder money. I mean, you and I are both Catholics. I'm not trying to knock the Catholic Church. I'm just saying, what if there were a bank out there that wasn't regulated by Europe or other institutions? If you were a mob boss or a trafficker or a drug, cartel, this would be the perfect bank to run your money. And that's what actually had happened several times in the history of the Vatican Bank.
So this present scandal, this is not conspiracy theory, and it's not just modern history. There have been nefarious people who have taken advantage. I mean, well, like you can take advantage of a local parish. You have very busy, very holy, very naive people doing the works of the church, and it just takes one person to get into that finance committee. We've seen it. I saw it when I was living in Virginia at a parish. It just takes one person.
Yeah, and that's what there's really been three in living memory. There's been three Vatican Bank scandals. One was in the 60s, and it climaxed up until about 1979, 1980. If anyone has seen Godfather 3, as we mentioned in the beginning, that's the plot of that movie, is sort of the unraveling of that Vatican Bank scandal. And people kind of know that in 78, Paul VI died, and then there's a pope who was elected. He's only pope for about a month, and he died mysteriously. A lot of people think he was killed. I'm one of those people. I think he was killed. And then a new pope came in, and then everything was kind of tidied up, and that was the end of that chapter. But then in the late 2000s, there was another big bank scandal. You might remember, Jason, the butler of Pope Benedict was sneaking documents out of his quarters. Do you remember that scandal?
I do remember that.
Yeah. So that opened up a whole other scandal. And Benedict had hired a guy named Archbishop Vigano, an Italian, to investigate, and he found a discrepancy of about 50 to 55 million US dollars, what would be our money in America, in euros.
That would be like a typical Joe Biden scheme. Like in Basra, his family, cashed a $45 million check and did nothing
exactly.
for it.
And in this case, it wasn't that Vigano was like, working the stock market and he made 55 million for the Catholic Church in, 11 months. What he did is he went in and started auditing accounts, and he found, here's 4 million over in this thing, and here's 8 million over here. So they had reported a deficit of something like 10 or 11 million. And by the end, they were up by 40. And again, it's not because Vigano made money. He just found money in all these side accounts, and he brought them all to light. But what made it especially scandalous at this time was that the butler was sneaking documents out. He gave it to a journalist. A journalist put these documents in a book. It's a very popular book. Benedict did an investigation. The butler was tried. He was found guilty. He admitted it. Then the Pope pardoned him, and he was released. And then all during this time, this was all like November, December, moving into January. And then in February, following all of this, Benedict announced that he was resigning from the papacy, which hasn't happened in centuries. And so because of the proximity of all of these events and then the sudden resignation of the Pope, people, obviously started looking into what's going on in the Vatican morally, but also financially, that maybe something is related to why Benedict resigned. And that happened in 2013.
And so the heroes of the story so far are Vigano and the butler.
And it's interesting. The butler, he said that he wanted to just bring these things to light, and and then Benedict pardoned him. And so people have speculated. No one knows, Jason. Did Benedict know this was happening? Later on, did Benedict realize that his butler was doing him a favor in bringing these things to light, or was the Pope embarrassed? We don't really know the intentions and who are the good guys and the bad guys and who is working together. It's a pretty big mess.
And so Pope Francis comes in, and he
He comes
creates.
in 2013.
Okay, and after lightning strikes, as you point out in your book,
Yep.
Pope Benedict announced he's resigning, and then immediately lightning strikes. I was watching it live.
I know.
You probably were too. Not once, but twice, right? Ba bam,
Twice.
ba
Yes.
bam, and you're like, man, this might not be very good. This is
Yeah. Well, another interesting thing is all this Vatican Bank scandal was coming out in 2012, and on January 1st, 2013, the ATMs in Vatican City State stopped working, and the Sistine Chapel, which is the main place of commerce in Vatican City, because that's where all the tourists go, they could no longer process payments. So the Vatican processing system was somehow shut down. People think it was the Deutsche Bank that did this. It's hard to tell. But the day after Benedict resigned and the day after the lightning struck the Vatican, everything started resuming again. So that really makes things look sketchy.
Yeah, and we don't even have to. We're going to keep going. We don't have to jump to conclusions, right? So that is, it all looks sketchy. It's all very
Yeah,
weird. It's all
there's foul play.
the two weirdest things I saw in my life. When Barack Obama was elected president, I was in Illinois. The day of the election, the pick 3 was 666 and the pick 4 was 7779. I'm like,
Wow.
I saw it with my own eyes. I'm like, that's weird. The only thing I've seen in my life weirder was watching live from the Vatican. Pope Benedict announced he's resigning. Then lightning immediately strikes twice, and not like these little lightning bolts. These were lightning bolts, just bam, bam. Okay.
Yeah, people could just Google Benedict Pope resigns lightning strike, and there's pictures all over the internet.
Yes, it's real. And so now we have Pope Francis, and okay, go. I'm sorry.
So Pope Francis comes in, and he realizes that there's a shadow over all of this. That it's kind of, I think, I don't know. I think it would make you a little bit insecure as a pope if the guy before you resigned and he's still alive and he's wearing, the white cassock and he's still calling himself Pope Benedict, right? And there's all this sort of scandal that's floating in the air. So he says, I'm going to clean things up. I'm going to reform the whole, in Catholicism, we call the court or the cabinet. In America, we call it the president's cabinet, all of his senior, advisors and staff. In Catholicism, it's called his curia. So these are all of his, senior prefects and prelates who are running all kinds of things in the church. I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to clean up the bank. So he made a small inner circle called the C9. These were 9 cardinals. That's why it's called C9. And they were over different elements, different, cabinets or parts of the curia, prefectures, and they were going to reform. And one of them was Cardinal Pell. He's an Australian cardinal, and he was chiefly over the big one, which was the money, the bank, the auditing. And I remember being in Rome in 2015. I was just off the Piazza of St. Peter, maybe 50 yards in a narrow street. No one was in this narrow street. And I saw standing on the side by himself, Cardinal Pell. And he looked so distressed and stressed out and horrible. I wanted to go over and just introduce myself because he's somewhat famous. I knew who he was just by seeing him. But he looked so bad that I was like, I just need to give him a space. I'm not going to go and talk to him. So I just sort of walked by him and maybe nodded my head or something, but I didn't actually talk to him. That was in 2015. And I kind of just wonder.
And he's generally a very winsome, handsome, striking. He's a man. He's a strong.
Yeah, he's tall. He's broad. He's
happy. I've been around him. Joyful.
Yeah, he seems like a solid man.
He's an Aussie.
Yeah, he's Australian. Yeah.
Yeah. So you see him distraught, and it's striking.
Yeah, I was kind of like, man, he wasn't looking at all. His head was kind of down. He looked really stressed, like he'd seen a ghost. And I'm like, this guy just needs a moment. I'm gonna keep on walking. That was in 2015. I'm just reading. That's just my personal anecdote. It means nothing. I'm just throwing it out there. And then he was convicted. He was accused after some of these things started coming out in the finances, he was convicted. And, many of us have looked at it, studied. None of us want to make light of any accusations. There have been so many victims, thousands and thousands of victims. We saw with Cardinal McCarrick in 2018, 19, his victims, the way he used the priesthood and his power as a cardinal to recruit and to groom and to abuse young men. And this is not just a solitary case. It's happened with other bishops and apparently with other cardinals even. So these accusations came against Pell, and everyone who knows Pell was like, this doesn't make sense. I don't think so. And the accusation was that it was in the sacristy, which is a public area in a church. It's not locked. It's not separate from the rest of the church. And it was while he was after a mass and while he still had all of his vestments, all of his robes on, and his pants were still. I mean, it's a pretty complicated story. Did you ever watch, Jason, the accusations and the
I did, and
regarding
the
Pell?
mother of the young man who had committed suicide, who never made these claims, it was his friend, right? She said it didn't happen. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have all the facts in front of me. I just remember I never wanted it to weigh out publicly because I want justice to be served. I think there should be investigations anytime these things happen. But I've always assumed he was a stand-up guy and he was well respected. And when I watched the testimony and heard the accusations, it just didn't line up. It just didn't seem possible at all. And he, through all of it, pled not guilty, innocent, repeatedly appealing. He never broke down. So anyway, he was just released. I guess they acquitted him. I don't know what the ruling was in Australia, but
After there was a gag order, I mean, the press was forbidden to report on this. And I had met the man, I knew the man, and like you, I don't want to make light of abuse, but it just, none of it made sense. And we were joking. I mean, I was with my friends, knowing that Pell was, spearheading this investigation of the Vatican Bank. We were joking about something's going to happen to Cardinal Pell, the way people were
yes,
joking about Epstein's going to commit suicide in prison. You didn't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out Epstein was not going to commit suicide in prison, but commit suicide in
correct.
prison. And people were making
Yeah, I mean,
jokes about Cardinal Pell's going to be framed up. Cardinal Pell's going to die. Then it happens, and then you see an
and it happens.
unprecedented censorship of the news coverage in the Anglo political community in a way that has never been seen. And it was all too predictable. And when I started going on social media, immediately defending Cardinal Pell, and I was expecting to get a lot of kicks in the face for doing this, of making light of
Mm.
abuse accusations, I was shocked at how I didn't get kicked in the face once. And in fact, everyone in Australia and New Zealand that I know that follows me on social media was chiming in with their own sort of personal stories and testimonies and how Catholics were feeling that this was not at all true and he was being railroaded. So
Yeah, and I think
now
even
he's
when
out
he's
and
out, and when he did interviews right after he got out, and it's like you said, I mean, of all the cardinals in the Catholic Church, who was he was given the job to go clean up the turds. He had the worst job. I'm sure when they got the C9, like, oh, I'm on the C9, great. You're going to be on the Vatican finance audit. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm going to get killed. Because previously I have a book called Infiltration, and I go through the whole Vatican Bank history, and you see almost everyone involved during, especially the 1970s Vatican Bank scandal, they end up committing suicide. Some of them are sketchy, kind of like Epstein.
well, the famous one is the guy on Blackfriars Bridge, right? That features
Yes,
centrally in a lot of stories, most famously, I think,
yes.
the Da Vinci Code. Can you tell us about that? Because I know everyone listening has heard that, right? That story, this banker.
Yeah, so there's two main characters. One is named Michel the Shark Sindona. He was a young man. He was in his 30s. He got hooked up with the Sicilian mafia, and he started buying up banks in Milan. He was a really good friend of Cardinal Montini, who went on to be Paul VI. In the late 60s, the Italian government said, hey, we want to rearrange our tax arrangement with the Catholic Church, and we're going to start taxing you. And this was going to basically bankrupt the Catholic Church. So the Pope, Paul VI, he brought in this mob guy, Sindona, to move money around, work something out with Italy, the taxes and all that. It's pretty. This is the origin of the first in our living memory Vatican Bank scandal. It's the one that's in Godfather 3, or that Godfather 3 is is based off of. And he ended up he was in America, and he fled, and he went. I think he went to Sicily. I think he was in Switzerland, and he was moving around. They finally caught him. He ended up going to prison, and they found him dead over his coffee. And they tested the coffee, and the coffee was full of cyanide. So someone got into the prison and got him whacked. That was Sindona. The other one is let me get his name here if I have it. No, I hit the wrong button. Is the Blackfriars guy is the Bridge. Well, I can't find his name, but he's also one of the bankers who tried to legitimize these things. And he was found hanging on Blackfriars Bridge in London. And a lot of the Freemasonic affiliations in Italy with the P2 are associated with the name Blackfriars. And so the fact that he was found hanging in London on the Blackfriars Bridge, people took to sort of be like the mob gives signs when they kill someone. And this was taken to be a sign, perhaps by the Sicilian mafia.
Yeah, pretty obvious sign. I mean,
yeah.
And, well, I've had dealings with guys like this. In the movie business, you get to meet some interesting folks. And a gentleman from Italy who lives in Jersey, moved here with nothing, built a big business. He's very conservative, strangely. He liked an article I wrote in the early 2000s. We developed a friendship. He probably listens to this podcast, so I'm going to change some of the facts. But our good friend Eduardo Verástegui had this guy who I didn't trust who was making a film. And Eduardo said, introduce him to some, we want to find him some investors. I said, I have one potential investor I'll introduce him to. And I asked this guy, would you meet this guy and let him pitch you his film? And I knew this guy was, I know what his businesses are, and I know the stories. So I brought the guy and Eduardo. We went to pitch the guy, and afterwards, this guy was so scared because he realized who he was meeting, and he was shaking. And we were in the car, and Eduardo was laughing, being Eduardo. And he goes, "Frate, what were you thinking? Bringing us to meet this guy?" And I said, "Oh, I don't trust you." And I pointed to this other guy. I said, "And this is the only guy I'd let invest this is the only guy that I know that I would let invest in your films." Because you're not going to be stealing his money. I can promise you that.
Right.
He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, oh, he'd kill you. And he was like shaking. I don't want his money anyway. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you don't. That was the last I ever saw that guy again. But so I can see why if you have the corrupt government of Italy bearing down on you, you want a guy like Shark in the middle of his name helping you out. So that's just my only defense to Paul VI.
Yeah.
When I had to deal with a guy I didn't trust, I brought him to the one guy I'd let invest in his film. And he was one of those guys. So now
the guy that hung on Blackfriars was Roberto Calvi. Sorry.
That's right. When I was in my 20s,
they called him God's banker. That was his nickname.
Yeah, well, he was hanging like Jesus, his first banker. And
exactly, Judas Iscariot.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's really interesting. And by the way, I want to interrupt this podcast to make it clear to everyone here, we love the Catholic Church. And there's corruption in all churches. But when you have 1 billion people, that's a lot of opportunity for corruption. A lot of opportunity for corruption.
And you have a centralized hierarchy. So it's in a way, if you want to infiltrate and bury in, there's layers of protection, just like in the mob, and people can use those layers in order to hide.
And people are naive, just like in faith film financing. It's really easy to take advantage in our market. I was a part of a film where I got duped, and Movie to Movement got jacked for us, it was like $160,000. And it was a lot of money. It's a lot of money for us, right? We're not a studio, we're a nonprofit. And it was a film on a Catholic saint. And I was very naive, and I advanced this money, and we were supposed to get paid back. And I said to my board, who would expect someone who really wanted to make this movie on Saint so-and-so to be a crook? And one of my board members said, Jason, what do you think a crook's going to make a movie on? Like, we're gullible. Like, you have to know. And I had to learn the hard way. So when you're around someone like Pope Benedict, who's writing books faster than we can read, he's an intellectual, he's an academic. He's holy. And you're surrounded by these types of folks. It's very easy. At your local parish, when you have people just prison ministry, everyone with their little ministries is just overburdened with work. It's not going to be very hard for someone to come on and put on a pious show, and
Yep.
whether it's at your local parish or whether it's in the Vatican or in your
Yep.
Baptist church or the Mormon church. I mean, this is going to happen. So would you now? I want to get to what should there be a Vatican Bank and bank reform. But before we get there, now that Pell is out, and he said, I
Mm.
read that there is unimaginable corruption, but that he voiced support for Pope Francis, which
Yeah. Let me read the quote. I think
okay,
this is a good quote. So he's interviewed and he's asked, how high up in the Vatican does this corruption go? Talking about the money. And Pell says, who knows? It's a little bit like Victoria. You're not sure where the vein runs, how thick and broad it is, and how high it goes. And then the guy interviewing him both says, I describe it as running right up to the feet of the Pope, not to the Pope personally, but right up to the feet of the Pope. Would I be wrong? And Pell says, I was actually surprised about this because I thought Pell would say maybe yes. But he says, yes, he says, we've got Cardinal Pell in, the Secretary of the State. So he's the number 2 guy. He said, he is certainly not corrupt. Just how high up it goes is an interesting hypothesis. So I saw Pell kind of being careful here. He didn't want to name any names, and he wanted to say it goes up pretty high, but I'm not going to specify. But the very fact that you have a cardinal who's in the C9 going on camera and saying the corruption goes up very high, not to the Pope himself, he says, not to the number 2, but he didn't say anything about the number 3 guy, right? It's a big deal.
and
It's
by
a
the
really
way,
big deal that
Taylor, that makes sense to me. Left-wing ideologues. I'm not saying Pope Francis is a left-wing ideologue. I'm just saying are as easy to take advantage of as very thoughtful Orthodox Holy Catholic priests. Like they have you follow me there? I can buy that it
yeah,
doesn't go up to Pope Francis.
all of us are, you know what? You just mentioned the deal, that you got played out on. We've all been screwed over, whether it's,
Yeah.
the guy you bought your tires from or you bought a house from or a used car. All of us are vulnerable, and there are blind spots in how we see the world. And I think when you mix in our religion, our faith, and that sort of creates an extra glue or an extra cement of trust, that allows corrupt, evil people to take advantage. I mean, if you were a child molester and you wanted to have complete access to young people and have adults trust you more than other people, what job would you want to pursue in order to gain that access to young people and be trusted? A priest,
Yeah,
obviously.
priest.
It's no
Or
wonder
yeah.
that the priesthood had hundreds and hundreds of men who were pervert pedophiles.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to go. They're going to go where they can use power and use office and use authority in order to take advantage of people and fulfill their perversions.
And where are you going to find people who have a disordered affection for money?
Exactly.
Thanks.
They're going to be working at the Vatican Bank and maybe, having martinis with Sicilian mob bosses, I'm guessing.
Yeah, we love Sicilians. Some of my best friends are Sicilians.
You're just saying that so they won't kill you after the show.
No, it's true though. It's true though. Probably 10% of my audience is Sicilian. Oh, here we go. Thanks, Taylor Marshall. So,
Yeah.
all right. So now here we are. Pell is out. Do you think it's going to get interesting? Do you think he's going to continue to speak?
So at the end of 2019, I made my prediction for 2020, and I said 2018 and 19 were the expose of sexual scandals and perversions in the Catholic Church, and there will be more of those coming. I know for a fact. I talked to people, but I said 2020 is going to begin a avalanche of financial scandals, and so I think here in April, with Pell getting out, I think there's a lot of people who didn't expect Pell to get out and didn't want Pell to get out, and he's out. And he even said in this interview, I have copies of all the financial documents on several continents.
I love that.
I think he's just letting people know, you can try to kill me. I've got a death switch on all these documents, and they're in several places, copies. So he made that public that he has copies all over the world. So I think he's playing the chess game. I think he knows there's people after him. The interviewer said, there are archbishops in hiding. What do you think of that? And he said, well, that's life. So I think he's he's kind of hardened up. He's been in prison, and maybe he'll be in exile. Maybe something will happen to him. I don't know, but he's taken precautions, and he's letting the world know, I've taken precautions. I have the facts. Don't mess with me.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was the best news that he got let out of prison. When we heard about Weekland, he wrote so
Yep.
many introductions to great books. Do you know how many books I had to rip the cover off and the introductions to keep? Some of my favorite books. And look, McCarrick, Bernadine, I didn't need anyone to tell me anything. Growing up in Chicago,
Yes, please, facts.
we all knew about Bernadine. And do you know, I don't know if I told you this before. When I first moved to DC, and not a Catholic, but in the pro-life world, I had a lot of Catholic friends. Every bishop knew about McCarrick because my first day at an Irish bar with a bunch of Catholic kids from Steubenville working for different dioceses and different Catholic apostolates, that's all they talked about was the lake house. I mean, it might have been my first time at a bar in DC. I heard them joking about McCarrick and his 13 priests and 12 beds. Like that was probably my first. And when these accusations came out of on Pell, I had several copies of one of his books on Catholic moral teaching, and I didn't because I give them away. And I said, you know what, I'm keeping these books, giving these books away. I know with certainty that this can't be true, and so it's just great to see that. I don't think people with an axe to grind against maybe orthodoxy believed it because they wanted to believe it, but I didn't even see a lot of that.
Right.
I just saw people genuinely just be quiet or defend him.
Yeah.
So let's move on to reform. So, what, as just a normal guy, lay Catholic guy in my parish, what should I be thinking about this? Is it above my pay grade? What should I be advocating, talking to my priest or my bishop about?
Okay, so I feel very passionate about it. This is not above our pay grade. We lay people in the Catholic Church, for those that aren't Catholic, it's not a democracy. We don't personally elect the Pope. We don't elect our local pastors. They're appointed for us. So the only thing we have are our 2 feet and our checkbooks. That's it. We can go to a different church, or we can give money or not give money, or funnel our money to different places. And so it is now the time for Catholics in 2020 to be very explicit with your pastor and with your bishop and say, I am not going to stop giving. I'm going to still plan whatever I give. Let's just pick a number. Let's say it's $200 a week. I'm still planning $200 a week, but I'm going to kind of keep it in an escrow until you guys release the plan on McCarrick, the investigation on McCarrick, until you start providing us sacraments again because of this whole corona thing. I mean, whatever it is, we need to be vocal and say, look, we want to support you, and I am going to fulfill my pledges eventually, but I need to see you be financially responsible, provide the sacraments, be open about the abuse, etc. And I don't think we just stop giving money. I think we have to articulate it to the pastors, to the bishops, to the cardinals, and to the Pope.
Yeah, I mean, we need to support our local parish, right? I just received a letter from my priest yesterday that, in this time of lockdown and people not going to church, and this is something I didn't think about, that our parish is really suffering right now.
Yeah.
Do you have, like, at the Taylor Marshall show, like, any petitions or anything you've put up? I think this might be something we should get going.
I don't know. Bishops don't care about petitions. Let's be honest. They don't care. The only person who can fire a bishop is the Pope. So they don't really care. You go and you go door to door and you go get yourself, 12,000 signatures and see what happens. Nothing is going to happen. People have tried this. Nothing happens. The only thing that works is appeals to Rome, which are very difficult and take a very long time, and closing the wallet. So, I mean, this is my opinion. You might disagree, Jason. If a parish says to me, hey, times are really hard, please send checks to the church, And I think we can say, well, you haven't said a mass for us. You haven't opened up baptisms. You haven't preached a sermon. You're not hearing confessions. You're not doing anything. What are we supporting?
Yeah,
A mortgage payment?
yeah, that to me is what's been the most frustrating is the thought of very pious, devout Catholics, elderly, dying alone
No last rights.
without the sacraments. You know what the bishops don't like though is publicity. And before I was Catholic, there was a bill to legalize assisted suicide in Hawaii, and I was director
Mm,
of Hawaii Right to Life. This was in 2000, and we had a Bishop Di Lorenzo, and he wasn't going to go testify. And I went to his office
mm.
with a hammer and a piece of paper that said coward and a nail. And I said, if you do not go testify, here I was an atheist, actually, director of Hawaii Right to Life. I am going to call a
Love it.
press
Love it.
conference and nail my one thesis to your door. So
Hmm.
you either address a national news story or you just go down and testify. And he threw a fit, yelled at me, and he went and testified.
Yeah.
So publicity gets, it was great being an atheist. I
Yeah.
could be disrespectful and rebellious that way.
Yeah.
Maybe as a late
Well,
Catholic, I might not want to
I
do
mean,
it.
maybe not disrespectful, but yes, hold their feet to the fire. I mean, these men, when they became priests and when they became bishops, they promised before God to offer themselves as martyrs for Jesus Christ for the sake of the people, the laity. They should be willing to crawl over broken glass, run through fire, expose themselves to the Black Plague, which thousands of priests did, by the way, in the Middle Ages, to get on ships and go across the world to evangelize, to risk everything for Christ and for Christ's sheep. So to close the doors and to sit around and do nothing, this is not acceptable, in my opinion. People could disagree. I think it's not acceptable. Jason, I just, before this show, took my family. We all got in a van and we went to Sonic. You got Sonic in Hawaii?
I wish we had Sonic in Hawaii. No, I love Sonic,
Okay.
especially their
So we went,
drinks.
yes. So we were like, should we go to Whataburger or Sonic? And my wife was like, oh, we need to get the good drinks. So I said, okay, we're going to Sonic. So because you can get like the ocean water and the cherry limeade. So we went to Sonic, and I was thinking about this because I'd been writing about it earlier today. I look around, there's over 100 people at Sonic. People are walking around, sitting on curbs. There's people coming in and out carrying burgers, fries, money, back and forth, receipts. If you want some more ketchup, handing us ketchup through the window, right? Back and forth. And I'm thinking to myself, this Sonic is doing more effort and more activity than the bishop of this diocese. The manager of this Sonic is more bold and more serious about what he's about than my local bishop, who has not even provided any Eucharist or Mass or anything. You can barely get a confession. You got to ask around and snoop around. It's like an underground railroad to get sacraments. And
A
I'm
lack
thinking
of.
to myself,
Oh, look, I'm sorry.
yeah, I'm just thinking to myself, the manager of Sonic is more serious of Sonic than the bishops are about the Catholic faith in Jesus Christ. I don't know how. And our governor in Texas has said churches are necessary; they should be open. So there's no government restriction. It's just fear.
Well, let me tell you, the only contact I've had with my parish is a letter asking for money yesterday. My
What a joke.
movie to movement. I'm going to tell you, this has been the most influence we've had in ever in the past month. I said to my team, we're going to stand on this stumbling block and turn it into a stepping stone. Let's amplify our influence. So we're doing different work to flatten the hunger curve. We're working with different government agencies. We're working with certain ambassadors. We're working with news agencies, local and abroad. I started doing this podcast every day, and last week we were in the top 200 podcasts on Chartable. And from a podcast that really didn't exist, something I did hit or miss. Now I'm doing 5 times a week. I called my barber. I said, I need a haircut. Come to my house. I got you. I called my Muay Thai
Mhm.
coach. Hey, I need someone to hold mitts for me. I want to train. Come over. I got you. I couldn't go
Nice.
get confession.
You call your priest. Hey, I committed a mortal sin. I might go to hell forever. Yeah, I can't really help you right
I've
now.
embezzled $40 million from the Vatican Bank.
Yeah.
Help.
Yeah, and I need to confess my sins and receive absolution. Oh, I can't help you right now. What a joke, Jason. What a joke. Shame on them. Shame on them.
The lack of a sense of urgency and thoughtfulness. If I was a priest, I can promise you, if I would be at the hospital demanding to meet with every Catholic, and if they wanted to quarantine me and give
Yeah,
me my own little room or a tent in the parking lot,
right.
I would say I'll have a tent in the parking lot until this is over. But
Hmm.
everyone's going to get last rites and they're going to get confession. Okay,
Yeah.
that's just what's going to happen here.
Or
And
at least, the church says if you're within hearing distance of the absolution, you be absolved. At least, put grandma up against the window and he can walk over to the window and absolve her through the window. I mean, get creative, do something. You can't just sit around and drink martinis all day, fathers.
no, do you know? And I know there are a lot of priests that listen, and there are bishops that listen to the show. Just have a sense of
Good.
urgency. It's frustrating. We can't do everything. We're lay people. Eduardo and I, we visit prisons, and we went to death row in Texas, and we met with the woman that murdered Selena, for example. We met with
Oh,
several
wow.
other women on death row, and one of the things we were shocked about, we were shocked that we asked, well, Eduardo did, because I'm not holy enough to think to ask this question. But the first thing he asked these women on death row is probably the first thing you would think to ask, which I didn't think to ask. What would be the first thing you'd want to ask these Catholic women?
Have you been to confession?
That's right. It was the first thing,
Yeah.
Eduardo. Not any of them had seen a priest since they had been there. And
Oh,
many of them had
man.
been there for 10, 20 years. And
Oh,
so Eduardo, being who Eduardo is, Eduardo Verástegui, the actor, director, producer, and saint. I mean,
he's a
he's
good
just a
guy.
beautiful man. He arranged it. He got them confession right away,
Wow.
and we were brought there by an evangelical ministry to speak to the general population, and somehow we were able to go meet with. I think Eduardo was friends with Selena. I think he asked, can we go meet with her?
Mm.
And which was interesting. All of the other women on death row had really committed their life to God, were very repentant for their sins,
Mm-hmm.
except for this woman that killed Selena. All she kept asking us
Wow.
for was like to get her stuff, and she was kind of mean.
Really?
Yeah, strange,
Huh.
but
Mm.
but but yeah, it's just disheartening. It's just really I can't imagine. The man who raised me died of the flu. He got pneumonia. He got the
Mm.
flu and pneumonia,
Mm.
fighting cancer. And in August, I got to be with him his last 7 days. And one of my greatest, what I was so grateful to God for was 10 years before he came to hear me speak. And I said, Dad, I'm not going to, it was at the Basilica. I'm not going to let you hear me speak. He was baptized Catholic. He was my mother's second of six husbands, I think, but he was the man that raised me and my siblings.
Okay.
And he was a saint. He was only the biological father of two of us, but he signed four of our birth certificates. Just
Wow.
a
Huh.
real holy man,
Yeah.
and just not in a Catholic way for most of his life. He was an alcoholic for most of his life, but he came to hear me speak, and I said, Dad, I'm speaking at the Basilica. There are 100 priests down there giving confession. You cannot hear my speech until you go to confession. And he
Wow.
hadn't been to confession since 8th grade. Well,
Wow.
he went down, paced for like 2 hours, and he came back a new
Wow.
man. And he never left the church again.
Amazing.
Became very involved in his
Amazing.
parish. The last 7 days of his life, I prayed the rosary with him on the night shift every night. We talked about death and dying and why does God allow suffering. And he had last rites. He had confession, died in a state of grace.
It's
If
beautiful.
if you would have tried to keep a priest away from my dad, I tell you,
No.
nah, it would be ugly.
Yeah.
It'd be like a Denzel Washington movie. You would have gotten last rites. We just want to see a sense
Yeah. I
of
mean,
urgency like this in our priests and our bishops.
yeah. I mean, we as Catholics, as Christians, we believe that there is this contagion that has hit humanity. It's called original sin. And it's taken out all of us except for our Lord Jesus and the Blessed Virgin Mary. That's our belief as Catholics.
100%
All of us,
mortality rate, by the way.
100% mortality rate. And not only is it 100% mortality rate, original sin leads to things like rape, drug addiction, human trafficking, every single evil thing in the whole world. And there's only one cure, and that cure is Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ left ministers on earth, we call them bishops and priests, to administer his words, his teaching, and the sacraments. So the fact that those guys are not doing anything for now, like what, 5, 6 weeks now? It's a scandal. It's an absolute scandal.
And think
And
about
we Catholics need to say it is a scandal.
And Taylor, you have a huge following, and you're probably getting this a lot more than me. It's a bit overwhelming. I'm getting a lot of people emailing me and texting me about their depression, their loneliness, relapsing into addiction. A young
Mm.
woman messaged me yesterday. Her friend, who's very involved in the pro-life movement, is going through a rough time. If I will send her a funny, kind of personalized video, I said, of course. When people are lonely, you know what? One of the things I hate is being raised as a non-Catholic. I saw all Christians as do-gooders who were hypocrites and thought they were better than everybody, but all had their own
Mm.
secret little sins, right? Don't smoke, don't drink. What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't smoke, if I didn't drink, if I didn't sin, I think I'd probably be, God forbid, a Unitarian because I think I was good enough. But fortunately, like, I'm addled by all the commandments to one degree or another, and two of them hound me like dogs, right? So by the grace of God, uh, we understand the need for confession. And when people are lonely, and now there are a lot of people
Yeah.
living alone,
Yeah.
and
Right.
they're sad, and that's when the bad things start to creep in. That's when you need the
Mm-hmm.
sacraments the most. I mean, come on.
Yep.
And communion.
Passion about this. I mean, if there's any bishops or priests listening, this is serious, gentlemen. I mean, we will all be judged. And think of all those people who have died without the last rites, without extreme unction, all the people who are at home in mortal sin and they need to make a confession, the people who need to be baptized, people who need to hear a sermon and find hope this Sunday. It's not enough to just say, well, we're live streaming it. That's not the faith. It's good. It's a good supplement, but we need Jesus came and he touched people and he healed people. There's a personal connection. And, as a Catholic, I'm a convert to Catholicism. Catholicism is tangible. There's the smell of the incense and there you can touch the sacraments and you light the candle. And you know what I mean? When you're confirmed, you get the slap on the cheek and baptism, water runs down your face. I mean, this is a tangible, material religion and a faith. We feel Jesus touching us through these signs and all these wonders. So when you turn that off, that's bad. That's real bad.
Do you know, Taylor, you know what I got from a little girl in my neighborhood? I'm just guessing she was a little girl by her handwriting. Got a handwritten letter to my family from a girl in my neighborhood. Never met her. Don't know who she is. I don't think she knows who I am, but clearly she mailed our entire neighborhood. And it was like,
Beautiful.
Dear Jones family, my name is Susie so-and-so, and I live in your neighborhood, and I want to share with you about the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm sure in these times you're confused and you can be scared and you're thinking about God maybe for the first time in a while. And my family just wants you to know that we're praying for our neighborhood. And if you have any other personal prayers, you can email us or call us if you need a Bible or if you just want to talk. This was a little girl in my neighborhood.
Wow. Awesome.
Right?
Yeah, she's done more than 90% of priests have done.
Yeah. I don't know how we got here from the bank scandal. Taylor Marshall.
Well, it's scandal. There's all kinds of scandal. And Christ our Lord says, scandals will come, but woe to those by whom scandals come.
And I'm the biggest scandal. Can I tell you, Taylor?
I'm a scandal too. That's why I need to go to confession. That's why I'm saying open up the confessionals. I'm a sinner. I'm screwing up. I need to go to confession.
Do you know, Taylor, did I tell you I was a secret Catholic for a year? I ever tell you this?
I've heard a little bit of your story.
When I assented to the truth of the Catholic Church, I was so just caught up in just mischief. I thought, I don't want to be a scandal to the church. And it wasn't, so I'm not going to become Catholic. But I would get the Magnificat. I would go to church. I would sit down and pray when no one was there, and I would pray the readings. I did this for a year. And when people asked me what I was, I would say agnostic. I didn't want to say Catholic or I believe in the church because I didn't want to bring scandal. True story. When the homosexual sex abuse scandal broke, I thought, wow, my type of problems would be some good branding for the church. It's as strange as it sounds.
Right.
In my head as a young man, I thought, okay, my problems have to do with like grown women and consent. I'm going to pray and wrestle with this and I'm going to go to RCIA. Went to RCIA. they didn't even know the faith. And I called a priest and said, if you want me to be Catholic, you have to catechize me personally. And we arranged that.
Nice. Very good.
Then my big prayer was, I don't want to embarrass the church. Then after I get baptized and confirmed, I commit, to never sin again. I'm never going to sin. Maybe some venal sin. I'm never going to sin. And I'm going from my baptism, my confirmation. My friend Joe Gigani arranged for me to see the Beach Boys and go backstage. And I'm driving my car from Front Royal, Virginia to DC to go to this Beach Boys concert, to hang out backstage, praying the rosary to Mother Angelica. My car was so old, I had a cassette tape. So I got a cassette of Mother Angelica. I'm praying the rosary, just baptized. I said, I'm never going to sin. And really being a scandal was my number one fear. I get cut off in the middle. And ever get in these like zones where you feel just like holy. I was in the holy zone. I'm praying the rosary with Mother Angelica. I just got baptized. It's all gone. A car cuts me off. And unthinkingly, my hand comes up and I give the guy the bird with the hand with the rosary in it.
Oh, man. See?
I was a Catholic for an hour and a half, and I was a scandal.
Yeah, see, this is, none of us are perfect. I mean, anyone listening to us talk about Vatican banks or all that, I'm a sinner. I've messed up. I went to confession on Sunday. I was able to go, thanks be to God, and confess things and got advice and said I was sorry. And, part of going to confession is you're supposed to have resolve that you won't do it again, but, we mess up, and Christ is always there to meet us. So I just, I really hope that our let's not say the word priest and bishop. Let's use the word shepherd. Our shepherds will get out with the sheep. Sheep are hurting. Sheep are sick. We need shepherds to come out. And if they don't, Jason, the good news is Jesus is the capital G good shepherd, and he still has a plan for us. We're not gonna be left alone and desolate. He's always there with us. So we have that promise that he's always with us. But it sure helps when we have, our friendships and our pastors and the Mass and the liturgies and the sacraments and the scripture and sermons and all these things to give us hope and keep us on track.
Amen. Well, Taylor Marshall, I know you got a busy day ahead of you, and then in a couple of minutes, I'm doing an interview in the Middle East on a news broadcast on the coming crisis in the distribution of food and our call at Movie to Movement through our Vulnerable People Project to flatten the hunger curve. And that's something we're very, very concerned about. You're going to be joining me for 30 minutes. It's going to be you. I'm giving you half the show, and Kevin Sorbo, Hercules. You're going to be with a child of Zeus. He's going to have half the show, and then you're going to have half the show. And we're going to talk more in depth. We're going to go narrower and deeper into this Vatican Bank crisis, or the Vatican Bank scandal. So I hope that everyone listening tunes into the Alex Jones Show on the 4th hour to hear Taylor. Taylor, your book. You have a lot of books. I have not read all of your books, but I own all of your books. So I want you to know that. And
Thank you.
Infiltration by Dr. Taylor Marshall. Everyone needs to own this book, The Plot to Destroy the Church from Within. Whether you're Catholic or not, it is really interesting. If you were a fan of the Da Vinci Code, if you want to know the truth behind that silliness in that goofy novel, you need to read Infiltration. This is the real deal. This is the real story. Dr. Taylor Marshall, how do people follow you? You have the biggest podcast, Catholic podcast in the world. Is that fair to say?
I don't think so, but it's got some people following. It's good.
Well, I say it all the time. I say it all the time.
YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, wherever you listen to podcasts. YouTube's the best place because we do live feeds and we have comments and live Q&A and all that. So you could just, if you want to follow on YouTube, that's the best place. Just search my name, Taylor Marshall, 2 L's on Marshall on YouTube, and it'll pop up.
You may not, I don't know if you have the numbers. They're the largest, but you definitely have the most influential and most talked about Catholic podcast and YouTube program that I know of, because everyone I know talks about it. So, Dr. Taylor Marshall, thank you for joining the Jason Jones Show.
Jason Jones, keep up the great work. Love the show.
All right.
Awesome.
God bless you, brother. Thanks for coming on. Aloha, everybody. This has been another episode of the Jason Jones Show. Thursday, 4 o'clock hour. Kevin Sorbo, Dr. Taylor Marshall, and Tiana from Left to Left Show. She's going to have a special little video she's putting together for you called OK Zoomer Perspective on the COVID crisis. This episode has been brought to you by Movie to Movement, promoting a culture of life, love, and beauty through the power of film. Go to movieToMovement.com to find out about our new movie, Divided Hearts of America, starring New England Patriot tight end Benjamin Watson as he investigates the abortion extremism in America today. Governor Cuomo telling your story. Till tomorrow. Aloha.
This has been the Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media.